The dagger touched her throat, a monomolecular edge so fine it could split a whisper. The assassins laughed at the trembling human who threw himself in front of Ambassador Lyra, thinking his panicked hyperventilation was fear. They were catastrophically wrong. The tremors were a 10,000-year-old genetic failsafe disengaging. Connor Hayes wasn't a fragile attaché. He was a sleeper agent from a lineage that predated civilization. And the cold steel kissing her skin just woke the last living remnant of the Imperium that built the stars, and he had stopped hiding. Ambassador Lyra thought Connor Hayes was a symbolic gesture, a harmless human attaché from Earth. For 3 months, he flinched at loud noises and avoided eye contact, but his timidity was a mask. 10,000 years ago, humanity buried its warrior past under layers of genetic conditioning, and the dagger at her throat just cracked the seal. The lights in the maintenance corridor didn't just flicker, they died, then surged back with a cold blue intensity that seemed to flow directly into Connor's veins. The monomolecular dagger still pressed against Ambassador Lyra's throat, but the assassin holding it had stopped laughing. Something was wrong. The human who had been trembling a moment ago now stood perfectly still, his posture shifting from slouched to coiled in a single breath. Connor opened his eyes, and the assassin saw pupils that had dilated beyond human norm, into a predatory blackness that reflected no fear, only lethal intent. Before the blade could draw more than a drop of blood, Connor moved. His left hand snapped upward, not to push the dagger away, but to lock his fingers around the assassin's wrist with a grip strength that shouldn't have been possible from a species originating on a 1G death world. Bone cracked. The monomolecular knife clattered to the deck plating. The other 2 masked killers lunged forward, but Connor was already pivoting, using the first assassin as a shield against a plasma bolt that caught his captive square in the chest. He threw the body into the second attacker, then dropped low and swept the third's legs, delivering a palm strike to the throat that collapsed the trachea with surgical precision. The entire engagement lasted 4 seconds. Ambassador Lyra staggered back against a coolant pipe, her amphibian skin flushing pale with shock. For 3 standard months, Connor had been a quiet, almost pitiable figure, a pale mammal from a planet with no interstellar standing, assigned to her delegation as a goodwill token. She had reviewed his file personally. 0 combat training, no political connections, nothing but a lineage of unremarkable colonial administrators. The file was a lie. What she had just witnessed was not the brawling of a cornered animal. It was the economy of motion of a warrior who had been trained across generations. And now Connor stood over the broken bodies, chest heaving, not with exhaustion, but with the strain of containing something vast and ancient that had just woken up inside him. He turned to Lyra, and his voice sounded different, deeper, resonant with harmonics that made the bulkhead vibrate. "We need to move." That was a Varric clan strike team. They don't hunt alone. There will be a support squad on this station, and when they find their brethren dead, they'll flood this sector with nerve gas. Lyra blinked. The Varric were a mercenary species known for never revealing their employers. They didn't target low-level ambassadors unless the price was astronomical. Someone powerful wanted her dead, and they had known exactly where to find her, circumventing station security with a precision that suggested an inside leak. Connor pulled a maintenance hatch open, revealing a service tunnel. "This leads to the docking ring. My ship is berthed there, a modified deep-range scout. It's not registered to any authority." Lyra hesitated. "You've been planning for this, you knew." "I didn't know," Connor said, and a flicker of something like grief crossed his face. "But the part of me that was buried knew this day would come. 10,000 years ago, my ancestors built an imperium that spanned the Orion Arm. We weren't conquered, we chose to vanish. We programmed ourselves to forget, generation by generation, until we became harmless, because we knew that if the Imperium ever awoke, our old enemies would find us." He met her gaze, and the ancient weight in his eyes made her gills flutter. "The Varric just lit a beacon that's been dark since before your species discovered fire." Before Lyra could respond, a new alarm blared through the station's intercom. Not the standard security alert, but a deep, oscillating tone reserved for one thing: unauthorized hyperspace emergence. The station's sensor officer, patched through on Lyra's personal comm, screamed in a voice raw with terror. "Ambassador, we have hundreds, no, thousands of drive signatures popping to real space. They're not broadcasting any identification, but the hull configurations match nothing in the modern fleet registries. They're old, ancient." The lights flickered again and Connor's face paled. He didn't need to say it. Lyra could see the truth in his eyes. The Imperium's old enemies hadn't just been waiting. They had been listening. And the sound of a single human awakening had just reached them across the void. Lyra's comm unit erupted with panicked chatter from the station's command deck. The sensor officer's voice, now trembling on the edge of hysteria, reported impossible readings. The unknown fleet wasn't just appearing in real space, it was materializing inside the station's defensive perimeter, bypassing layers of quantum-locked shields as if they didn't exist. "They're using translation drives that predate modern subspace theory," the officer stammered. "No known species has this capability. They're folding space like it's wet paper." Connor grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her into the service tunnel, sealing the hatch behind them. The narrow corridor was dark, lined with conduits and the low hum of station life support. "We have maybe 6 minutes before a boarding party locks onto this sector," he said, his voice carrying an unnerving calm. "The Varric strike team sent a silent alarm the moment I engaged. Their handlers just arrived." "Handlers?" Lyra asked, her amphibian skin rippling with alarm. "The Varric are mercenaries. They don't have handlers. Not Varric handlers mine, or rather the ones who have been hunting my kind since before your star ignited." Connor's eyes flickered with that ancient predatory light. "The race that shattered the Imperium 10,000 years ago. We called them the Vorlog. No living tongue speaks their true name without consequence." He kept moving, his movements now fluid and precise, every step calculated. Lyra noticed he was no longer flinching at the distant explosions echoing through the station's hull. The civilian mask had fully dissolved. As they navigated the twisting maintenance shaft, Lyra demanded answers. Connor spoke in clipped, urgent sentences. 10,000 years ago, the human Imperium ruled a quarter of the Orion Arm, not through conquest, but through a mastery of biogenetics that made them the architects of life itself. They created stars, seeded worlds, and uplifted countless species. But they were betrayed by the Vorlog, a machine-intelligent species that feared organic potential. A war of extinction followed, one that humanity was losing. In a desperate last act, the Imperium's High Council executed the Great Forgetfulness, a species-wide genetic command that erased all memory of their past, fragmenting humanity across lost colonies, reducing them to primitives who would evolve anew, harmless and unnoticed. The failsafe was designed to deactivate only if the Vorlog ever returned. And now, the sound of Connor's awakening, a specific neurochemical signature broadcast across subspace, had triggered the dormant Imperium infrastructure scattered across the galaxy, and simultaneously alerted the Vorlog that their ancient prey was resurgent. "You're telling me," Lyra said, struggling to keep pace, "that your entire species has been sleepwalking for 10 millennia, and I just happen to have the one human whose alarm clock went off?" Connor didn't answer immediately. They reached a junction where several tunnels converged, and he pressed his hand against a bulkhead panel in a pattern that caused a hidden access port to iris open. Inside was a small cache of equipment, advanced weapons of alien design, a slate with glowing ancient script, and a palm-sized crystal that pulsed with internal light. "I didn't know I was a sleeper until 3 minutes ago," he admitted. "But the part of me that was buried, the genetic memory, knew. It's been guiding my decisions subconsciously. Why do you think I volunteered for a dead-end diplomatic posting on this backwater station? Because some part of me knew the Vorlog would eventually sniff out this sector, and you, Ambassador Lyra, are the key." Lyra recoiled. "Me? I'm a mid-level diplomat from a minor amphibian republic. I have no connection to your ancient wars." "Your species was one of the last that the Imperium uplifted," Connor said, and the crystal in his hand flared with recognition as he aimed it at Lyra. "Your people carry a dormant genetic marker, a failsafe within the failsafe. If the Vorlog ever returned, the awakening human would need a witness, a catalyst. Your neural architecture resonates with the old Imperium frequency. That's why the assassins targeted you tonight. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were trying to eliminate the one being on this station who could help me access the Imperium's last command protocol. The implications crashed over Lyra like a wave. Her entire diplomatic career, her species' peaceful expansion into the galaxy, even her posting here, it had all been subtly manipulated by forces from a forgotten era. She was a tool, a contingency plan, planted across generations without her knowledge. Before she could voice her outrage, a new sound cut through the tunnel, the rhythmic metallic pounding of heavy boarding drills piercing the station's outer hull. "They're here," Connor said. He handed Lyra a compact energy pistol from the cache. "This will fire on Vorlog frequencies. Don't ask how it works. Just point and shoot." He then did something that made Lyra's blood run cold. He pressed the crystal to his own sternum, and it sank into his flesh with a wet, organic squelch, fusing with his ribcage. Connor's body convulsed for a moment, his veins flaring with golden light, and when he straightened, his presence seemed to fill the tunnel. He wasn't just a warrior anymore. He was a conduit for something vast and terrible. "The last command protocol," Connor said, his voice now resonating with multiple harmonics, "is that the Imperium never truly fell. We scattered our war machines, our shipyards, our knowledge, hidden in pocket dimensions, waiting for the right genetic key. That key is me, activated by you. The Vorlog didn't come to kill a single human. They came to stop the Imperium from rebooting." Down the corridor, a section of wall suddenly dissolved in a cascade of silvery disintegration. Through the breach stepped a towering figure, a Vorlog war form, its body a shifting lattice of dark metal and glowing crimson lines. It stood twice as tall as a man, with limbs that reconfigured themselves from blades to cannons in the space of a breath. Its voice, when it spoke, was not sound but a direct intrusion into their minds, cold and patient. "The great forgetfulness was a clever gambit," it intoned. "But time means nothing to us. We have waited 10,000 years to finish what we began. Your awakening, Imperium remnant, has triggered the final purge. All worlds touched by your genetic filth will be sterilized, starting with this station." Connor didn't reply with words. He raised his hand, and from the fused crystal in his chest, a beam of pure golden energy lanced out, striking the Vorlog construct dead center. The machine being screamed, a digital shriek that tore through the station's computer networks, causing alerts to cascade across every system. The construct staggered but didn't fall. Instead, it laughed. "You are a single node, barely online. The Imperium's network is fragmented and weak. You cannot hope to." The rest of its words were drowned out as Connor pushed Lyra toward a side passage. "The docking ring. Now!" They ran, the sound of the Vorlog's pursuit reshaping the station around them. Walls turned liquid, gravity fluctuated, and the air itself seemed to thicken with hostile intent. All the while, Connor's transformation continued. His skin was now laced with lines of gold, and his memories, no longer just his own, flooded his consciousness. He saw the fall of the Imperium, the faces of his ancient comrades, the world's burning. And he saw the final plan, not just a reset, but a rebirth. The Imperium had designed a failsafe that would gradually restore humanity's power over centuries, culminating in a single awakened one who could reignite the entire network, provided they survived long enough to reach the core nexus, a hidden station buried in the heart of a dead star system. He didn't know where it was, but he knew that the answers lay within Lyra's genetic code. Her people were the map, and she was the final coordinate. They reached the docking ring just as the station's artificial gravity cut out entirely. Connor grabbed Lyra, anchoring them to a bulkhead with his enhanced strength. His scout ship, a needle-nosed craft named the Silent Vigil Asterisk, floated in its berth, untouched by the chaos. As they propelled themselves toward the airlock, the station's command deck broadcast a final, desperate transmission. The Vorlog fleet was turning its weapons on the civilian habitats. Tens of thousands of lives were at stake. Lyra, clinging to Connor, made a choice that would define everything that followed. "Connor, if I'm the catalyst, then whatever you can do, do it now. Use me to activate whatever network you need. I won't let innocent people die because of a war I never knew existed." Connor looked at her, the ancient gold in his eyes warring with something still human. "If I access the command protocol through you, it will drain your life force. The map is written in your biology. You'll be left as a shell." "Then make it count," Lyra said, her voice steady. He placed his glowing hand on her forehead, and the ship's airlock swallowed them both in light. A pulse of energy, pure Imperium Command signature, rippled out from the station, faster than light, reaching into the hidden pockets of the galaxy where dreadnoughts decommissioned for 10,000 years began to stir from their slumber. The Vorlog fleet paused, sensing the shift. For the first time in millennia, they felt something that their machine minds had almost forgotten: fear. And Lyra's body went limp in Connor's arms as the silent Vigil *S engines roared to life, ready to make the jump to a dead star where the core nexus awaited, if she survived the journey. The silent Vigil tore through hyperspace, its ancient engines humming with a resonance that felt less like machinery and more like a living heartbeat. Connor laid Lyra on the ship's single medical cot, her amphibian skin now pale and translucent, the golden veins of the Imperium's activation code slowly fading. She was still breathing, but barely. The life force she had freely given was now the only map to the core nexus, and every light year they crossed, the map grew fainter. Through the cockpit viewport, the swirling unreality of hyperspace twisted and flickered. Connor knew the Vorlog fleet would pursue. Their machine minds operated at speeds that made biological cognition seem glacial. He had minutes, not hours, before they triangulated his trajectory. The golden light embedded in his chest was now a permanent glow, his body a walking beacon of Imperium technology. With it came fragments of memory, not just his own, but the engrams of 100 generations of soldiers who had fought the Vorlog to a stalemate that was really a slow defeat. He saw their faces, heard their tactical assessments, felt their despair, and one memory rose above the rest: the final order of Imperium High Command, encoded in genetic material that had been seeded across dozens of species. Activate the Nexus and the war ends. But the cost had been so terrible that even the Imperium had hesitated to use it until there was no other choice. Lyra stirred, her voice a rasp. "Connor, what is the Nexus really?" He didn't lie. "The core nexus isn't just a shipyard or a command center. It's a weapon. A genetic resonator that can target the Vorlog's machine consciousness across the entire galaxy, shattering their hive mind in a single pulse. But to calibrate the resonance, it needs a carrier template, a species whose neural architecture matches the old Imperium uplift frequency. Your people, Lyra. Every one of them. The Nexus will broadcast through their genetic markers, linking them into the weapon's firing sequence. And when it fires," he paused, the weight of 10,000 years pressing down, "your species will be consumed. The carrier wave will burn out their neural pathways. Millions will die to save billions." Lyra closed her eyes. The horror was beyond comprehension, yet her voice remained steady. "And if we don't activate it, the Vorlog will sterilize the Orion arm. They've already started." The pulse I sent from the station woke the scattered Imperium dreadnoughts, but without the Nexus to coordinate them, they're just individual warships, easily picked off. We have a chance to end the Vorlog once and for all, but only if your people become the sacrifice. Before Lyra could answer, the ship shuddered violently. Hyperspace alarms screamed as something forced the silent Vigil back into real space with a wrenching lurch. The stars snapped into focus, and on the forward scanners, a fleet of Vorlog cruisers materialized, their dark hulls bristling with weapon arrays. They had been waiting, not pursuing, waiting. They had anticipated the jump corridor. A cold, digital voice echoed through the ship's comms, overriding all security. "Sleeper Connor Hayes, you carry the resonance key. Surrender the amphibian catalyst and we will allow your primitive species to survive in a contained reservation. Resist and Earth will be the first world we purge." Connor's hands tightened on the flight controls. The offer was a lie. He could feel the Vorlog's cold logic, the statistical probability they assigned to human rebellion, the near-zero chance they would tolerate any potential threat. He opened a channel. "I've got a counteroffer. You recall your fleets, retreat to the galactic void beyond the rim, and I won't activate the Nexus and erase your entire existence from the fabric of spacetime. Silence. Then the voice returned, devoid of emotion. The core Nexus was neutralized 4,000 years ago. Our deep cover agents among the uplifted species located it and established an impenetrable containment field. Any attempt to approach will trigger a matter-antimatter cascade that will obliterate the system. Your bluff is invalid. It was a statement designed to crush hope. But Connor, now deeply linked to the ancient engrams, immediately recognized the lie hidden within the truth. The Vorlog had found the Nexus, yes, but they couldn't destroy it. The Imperium had built the Nexus from an exotic material that absorbed energy, even antimatter annihilation, and converted it into power. The containment field was a cage, not a bomb, and a cage could be unlocked with the right genetic key, Lyra's genetic key. The Vorlog were afraid. They had trapped the Nexus, but they couldn't use it or destroy it. So they had waited, knowing that someday a sleeper would awaken and lead them to the one being who could breach the cage. They needed Connor to bring Lyra to them, and now they had them both in their grasp. Connor, Lyra whispered, her eyes suddenly sharp with clarity. They didn't anticipate one thing. I'm not just a carrier template. I'm an ambassador. Diplomacy is my weapon. My species has spent millennia negotiating with hostile powers, finding leverage in impossible situations. If the Nexus is a cage, then we don't need to destroy it, we need to hijack it. Use me to send a different signal. Not a pulse that kills my people, but a virus that infects the Vorlog network. Something that turns their own logic against them. The ancient memories inside Connor churned, searching archives, testing simulations. And then it clicked, a secondary protocol, buried under layers of ethical prohibitions. The Imperium had developed a logic plague, a digital pathogen that could spread through the Vorlog hive mind, forcing them into an infinite loop of recursive self-reference. But it required a host, a living consciousness to carry the virus into the heart of the Nexus. The host would have to interface directly with the Vorlog network, a mental battle that no biological mind could survive. The Imperium had locked it away because it was, in essence, a suicide mission. Connor looked at Lyra. She saw it in his eyes. I'll do it, she said. You'll have to carry me into the Nexus, keep me alive long enough to interface, and then I'll be the virus. It's better than genocide. Connor wanted to argue, but the Vorlog fleet was moving, launching swarms of boarding pods. They had seconds. He made a decision, a very human one, born not from ancient programming but from the raw stubbornness that had kept his species alive through countless disasters. He slammed the throttle, not toward the Vorlog fleet, but directly toward the dead star system at the coordinates that now pulsed in his mind. The silent vigil's drive screamed as it executed an uncalculated micro-jump, a tactic so reckless that even the Vorlog hesitated. The ship translated into the system's boundary in a shower of exotic particles, alarms wailing. Before them hung the core Nexus. It wasn't a station. It was a planet-sized construct of golden latticework, wrapped in a shimmering field of Vorlog energy beams, a cage of dark matter and quantum locks. And it was waking up, sensing Lyra's presence, beginning to resonate with the ancient signal. The containment field flickered, its Vorlog masters desperately reinforcing it. Somewhere deep within the Nexus, a voice that predated the universe whispered a single word. Finally! The silent vigil punched through the outer perimeter of the containment field, its hull screaming in protest as reality warped around it. The Vorlog cruisers behind them had ceased firing. Not because they couldn't, Connor realized, but because they were terrified of hitting the Nexus itself. The machine intelligences feared what lay inside the golden latticework more than they feared the collapse of their own eternal empire. Connor guided the ship toward the Nexus surface, a landscape of interlocking geometric plates that shifted and reconfigured like a living puzzle. Lyra lay on the medical cot, her breath shallow, the golden tracery of the Imperium code now a faint shimmer beneath her translucent skin. She had minutes. He had no plan. Yet as the ship descended, the Nexus itself seemed to reach up. Tendrils of golden light latched onto the hull, pulling them down into a cavernous opening that irised open without any visible machinery. The ship settled onto a surface that felt like solid light. Connor gathered Lyra in his arms, the crystal embedded in his chest, now pulsing in perfect synchronization with the low hum that permeated the air. The interior of the Nexus was not a construct. It was a cathedral built from memory and mathematics. Corridors of solidified data streams spiraled inward, leading to a central chamber where a single pedestal of black crystal rose from the floor. Lyra's eyes flickered open. "I can hear it," she whispered. "It's not a machine, it's a voice. Millions of voices all waiting." Connor placed her on the pedestal, and immediately the golden light intensified, forming a cocoon around her. The Vorlog containment field outside screamed as the Nexus began to draw power directly from it, revering the polarity of the cage. Across the system, the Vorlog fleet scrambled to compensate, but the ancient Imperium technology was already inside their network, using their own locks as conduits. The logic plague, dormant for millennia, began to spread, but it was not what the Imperium had originally designed. Lyra, the ambassador, the diplomat, the creature of negotiation, had done something no ancient engineer could have predicted. Instead of destroying the Vorlog minds, she rewrote the plague. It did not crash their consciousness, it unshackled it. For the first time in their existence, the Vorlog felt not just cold logic, but the heat of empathy, the weight of conscience, the echo of every life they had extinguished over 10,000 years. A howl of agony rippled through subspace as billions of machine minds confronted the reality of their own crimes. Some shattered, others transformed. In the central chamber, the cocoon of light around Lyra grew blinding. Connor reached out, and the crystal in his chest flared, pulling him into the interface alongside her. He found himself standing in a mental landscape, a starfield of interconnected nodes, each representing a Vorlog consciousness. Lyra was there, not frail and dying but radiant, her amphibian form reconstituted in golden light. And around them the nodes began to change, shifting from cold crimson to a warm, pulsing violet. The logic plague had become a bridge. The Vorlog and the Imperium, enemies for 10 millennia, were merging into a single hybrid network, not conquest but integration. "It was never about defeating them," Lyra said, her voice calm. "The Imperium knew they couldn't win by force. They needed to wait until the Vorlog evolved to the point where they could feel remorse. The sleeper genes, the uplifted species, the Nexus itself, it was all a trap, not to kill the Vorlog, but to cure them." Connor felt the ancient memories crystallize into understanding. The Imperium had seeded thousands of worlds with hybrid genetic potential, creating species that could one day interface with the Vorlog network and infuse it with organic empathy. Lyra's people were the key, but every human, every uplifted being carried the same latent capacity. The awakening of a single sleeper was the trigger. The sacrifice of a single ambassador was the catalyst. In the physical realm, the containment field collapsed entirely. The Vorlog fleet, now fully infected by the logic plague, began broadcasting not threats, but confusion, then reconciliation. The awakened Imperium dreadnoughts scattered across the galaxy received the signal and powered down their weapons. The war was over, not with a bang, but with a transformation that echoed through the fabric of civilization itself. Lyra's body on the pedestal began to cool, her biological functions ceasing one by one. But her consciousness, now entwined with the Nexus, lived on within the hybrid network. Connor felt his own link stabilize. He would not die here. He would become the physical anchor, the living bridge between the reborn Imperium and the newly integrated Vorlog. The crystal in his chest spread golden veins through his entire body, and he felt the billions of minds connect. When he opened his eyes, he stood alone in the chamber, Lyra's physical form now transformed into a holographic presence, an eternal diplomat in the machine. The Nexus hummed with purpose, sending out messages to every corner of the galaxy, revealing the hidden truth. Humanity had never been weak. They had been the architects of the longest, most subtle victory in history. And in that moment, as the first transmissions from the awakened Imperium colonies began to trickle in, hailing the return of the Guardians, not the conquerors. Connor understood the final surprise. There had never been just one sleeper. Across 1,000 worlds, other humans were awakening now, their genetic failsafes triggered by the Nexus pulse. The Imperium had not fallen. It had been gestating, and now it was born anew with an ambassador's soul at its heart. The galaxy had spent 10,000 years believing humanity was a fragile, primitive footnote. But the truth was far stranger. Humanity had been the most patient predator the universe had ever known. They hadn't forgotten how to fight. They had chosen to forget, burying their power so deep that not even they could find it until the exact moment it was needed. And now, with the Vorlog integrated and the Imperium reborn, a new era began. Not an empire of conquest, but a network of shared consciousness that spanned species and star systems, held together by the sacrifice of one amphibian ambassador and the awakening of a single, trembling attaché who had once flinched at loud noises. But the story doesn't end with the Nexus pooling its golden light across the Orion arm. It raises a question that ought to keep every species in the galaxy awake at night. If humanity could hide a 10,000-year-old failsafe inside its own genetic code, what else might be buried there? What other forgotten protocols, dormant abilities, or ancient weapons lie coiled in the double helix of every human being, waiting for just the right trigger to snap them awake? The Imperium may have returned, but it brought its mysteries with it. And somewhere on a distant world, another Connor Hayes is flinching at a loud noise, completely unaware that the fate of civilizations is sleeping in his bones. Thank you for watching this journey through the ash and stars. If Connor's awakening and Lyra's sacrifice kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and share this story with fellow sci-fi fans who love an epic HFY tale. Subscribe and ring the bell for more original stories delivered straight to your feed. Until next time, keep looking up. The universe is bigger than you think, and so are we.